Alright guys, putting a video together here for my friend Brian, who is building his first quad. So he's working on soldering, and I wanted to give him a little instruction. I've tried, last night I searched, and I remember I had this problem too when I was first getting into this. There's lots of videos out there on YouTube of people talking about soldering and telling you how to solder, but not very many actually showing you and showing you some of the little tricks, keeping everything clean. So that's what I'm going to show Brian here, but hopefully it'll help out some others too, because I've definitely ruined some boards. I'm sure other people out there have done the same. Brian just ruined one, so he's ordering another. But I'll try to speak clearly too, so the captions work for everybody, and try to show some good tricks I've learned here, because it can be frustrating. Soldering can be frustrating, but it can also be very fun. It's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, especially this type of thing, building mini quads and setting them up and buying all the parts and doing it yourself. You also learn how to work on things and troubleshoot and repair, so good thing. I'll try to keep it short here too. I'm timing here. So first thing I want to show Brian here too is he had some questions. Very basic PDB. We'll take off. This is the ribbon for the flight control power. We're only going to use the positive and negative. I'm actually going to pull out the signal, the white signal wire. You pull that plastic tab up here, and then you can actually pull that white. So we'll pull that white wire out of there. But that's what it looks like without it. One thing I wanted you to check too is I have had a few of these pins. If they come like this, I had one that underneath here wasn't actually soldered, so check those. This one is. This is a Maytech PDB. I think this one was purchased from HobbyMate. Really cool. They call it a 5-in-1 PDB. It has a buzzer. All of your different circuits are protected, and I've tested that as well. I had a bad camera and I had it connected up, and everything would work until I plugged in my camera, and then the thing wouldn't boot up. It wouldn't actually deliver power to my FC because it sensed a problem there. So very cool PDB, and I have ran the crap out of this one. But for reference, right here you got ground, your 12 volt and your ground. That's for your video transmitter. That's your power for a video transmitter. You have a 5 volt positive, negative here. That's going to be for the camera. And these two, ground and 5, that we're going to use with the cable, that's where you're actually going to route that to your flight controller. The way I do it, I don't like using pins on my flight controller, so I'll actually clip these and I'll solder the positive. We're going to remove the white wire altogether, but we'll solder the positive and negative onto the FC, positive and negative. So I will plug in 2 prongs down here on the flight controller, because I haven't had any problems with those, and that's down here underneath the flight controller. So I also put I'll either put like a little bit of hot glue or liquid electrical tape when I'm finished, when I have that on there too, just to keep it secured. Never had to pull off there, but just to do it. But that's basically the PDB. Obviously this is the front of the quad where your camera mounts. This is the back. Your battery is going to go to the back. I have a battery wire here. I'm also going to show you, this came tinned, but obviously that is ugly. I hope you can see that. I'm going to tin those, redo it, put some more. Probably won't do anything with the shielding. I'll probably leave that about there and heat it up and add some. I'm also going to tin the board, tin my pads. I'll probably just tin the battery. I don't have any ESCs with me right here, so I'm just going to show how this is the most difficult one to solder, because it's 14 gauge. Your largest wire takes the most heat. I think I do this one at 750 degrees. My ESCs I think I do at 700, and your little guys like your camera and VTX, I do those like 650. So I believe those are the numbers I stick with. But we'll hit this one here, and the first thing to make sure, I'm going to pull the camera up so make sure we can see this real well. See some solder work here. little zoom in there. I got my Heiko. I'm going to power that up. Thing to talk about too. Nice clean soldering tip. Keep that thing clean. I like using the brass. I don't use the sponge much. I use the brass a lot. Just go in there and twist it around. Don't have anything on right now. I just keep that guy in there. And you keep it clean. Everything's got to be clean. So that's my soldering iron. You really need a good soldering iron. There's a lot of skill involved with it, but there's also, you know, I had my little soldering kit here. That's my little portable. This thing, that's kind of a piece of junk. I only use it in emergencies because even though it has your dial here, what they don't hold a constant temp very well. They just don't. You need a unit that's actually monitoring. This is actually monitoring actively the heat, and it keeps it just about perfect. So I've never had a problem with it. If you've ever had an iron where, you know, you're even keeping it really low, but you're trying to solder the tip, and it just splatters everywhere, it's because it's getting too hot. It's just too hot. Plus, it's not a very good metal. The quality of the steel and the tip and everything, that makes a big difference because that's the transfer of your heat. So, quality of your tips, quality of your iron, and keep it clean. I like the brass. That works. Brass works best for me. So we will get going here because I don't want to go too over on time. I kind of have a rigged up setup here because I'm not at home, but you want to make sure you have whatever you're soldering on secure. Not going to move around, and of course I can't just set it flat because I have this thing's going to move around. I have screws underneath of it, and I like to put it on the quad when I solder up like this. That way when you're routing your wires, you know where everything's going to go. One thing to note, I don't put my nylon standoffs on first because I burn those. You touch it with the iron and you'll burn those. They burn really easy, and it's not good for you to get that stuff all over your soldering iron. So I just put temporarily some steel screws in there just to hold her down. Didn't cinch it because you're bored. Don't tighten the crap out of it. Just to hold it in there. And then I'll put my standoffs on there when I'm done soldering the PDB. So get that very stable. First off, we're going to re-tin these guys. Then we're going to tin the board. I got a couple of tools. I don't have it's nice to have clamps and things like that. So I just got some of these little made helpers from tools I had here. I did bring my soldering kit, so I had a couple of those. These are nice to have, your little brushes, these little poker tools, those things like that. Pick tools, tweezers, solder remover, solder sucker they call it. So Brian was talking about that. They're nice to have if you have to remove, but not necessary. You can remove with some simple tools. You can remove by wicking, swiping away, pulling away. And you can usually get rid of most of that. Now, so first is first. Let's get cleaned up and cleaning products. What I like to use, you can get away with using isopropyl alcohol. It works. Problem is, you know, most of your is 70%, and that does leave, there's some other goodies in there that'll leave a little residue on there, so it's not ideal. I prefer to use acetone and Q-tips. I like doing that. It seems the cleanest. Acetone, you don't want to get it all over the plastic and the sensitive parts of your, you don't want to just splatter acetone, or I don't think you want to do it with alcohol either, but acetone will actually eat some of those parts, your chips and your diodes and things. So try to stay as close to the pad as you can. Don't get it everywhere. But all I have with me is alcohol. I also have some alcohol pads. It's no different. They're 70% isopropyl alcohol, so it's the same thing as using this guy. And I like using the Q-tips a little better. They seem a little cleaner. Using it, and I'll put some alcohol on one end, keep the other end dry so I can wipe it off there. So even these that are clean, I'm still, you know, I've been handling it. There's hand oils on there. Who knows what else is on there, so keep that stuff off there. A lot of guys, on videos talking about flux. I have used flux. I don't, in a new application like this, it doesn't seem necessary to me. I've done it with and without, you know, put some flux on there before. As long as you're clean, you got flux, core, solder, as long as you're clean, you got enough flux, everything should go. This is, for me, more when you get into trouble, when you need to remove and resolder, things like that, because then you're dealing with stuff's getting dirty, it's getting degraded, you're having issues with bonding. That's where that'll help you. I don't use it when I put all these all together without using any flux, as long as you keep everything clean and do it right. So let's clean first. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this alcohol out. And I'm going to use just use a water bottle cap, so I don't have to leave the alcohol open. And by the way, I'm in a well ventilated room. You don't want to be soldering and doing this kind of thing if you're in a closed small room. You may even want to use a mask. You don't want to be inhaling solder. There's lead in there. This is tin lead solder, and the flux isn't probably very good for you to inhale either. So make sure you're well ventilated. Got windows open over here, got a window open right here, and this has central air, so there's a air collector right above me. So with that said, our ventilation's good. Don't need much. Even your wires, I clean those first too. I clean everything before I try to solder or bond anything, just to get everything to grab. So got Q-tip, just gonna take a little bit, not much, because I don't want it getting all over the board. And I'm only doing the battery pads, so I'm only going to clean those real quick, just my battery pads. I'm not going to tin the whole thing up right now. I'm going to make sure alcohol dry away, but I just want to wick away anything, any residue. Looks really nice. Same thing with this guy. This is ugly. I don't know. The one thing bad about Q-tips is, see, it will want to, if you got something that sticks like that, it'll want to pull the Q-tip apart and you might get fibers on there. But that's going to happen too if you try to use cotton balls or if you try to use your prep pads. They might be a little bit cleaner at that. Let's pull one. It might not come apart so much. Let's try it. I've used these a lot. I do like using these too. They work fine. Make sure you get any. See, it is pulling little fibers off there too, so there's really not a way to. And just make sure you don't have any fibers on there. And see, there's some catching. So even that does it too. It doesn't do any better than Q-tips. Or just dip it in alcohol maybe. I'm gonna leave it at that. It's looking pretty good. Okay. What's our angle look like? It's looking pretty good. So, we're going to come in right here, but let's tin these bad boys up first. One thing I gotta do too, don't be tinning things up and applying solder to things right above your board. I've seen a lot of guys do that. They'll be working along here, and you know, you're always putting solder on tip here, and they'll do it right above the board. You can splatter solder on your board there, so don't do that. One thing it's good to do too is, I see a lot when you're doing a lot of the solder stuff, may even take a piece of electrical tape. So I'm just going to take a little piece of electrical tape, just put it over top there. Take another one, put it over top of the rest of that. So all we're really looking at is our pads. I'm still going to inspect that. You know, when I'm finished soldering everything, you still go inspect, maybe take a magnifying glass, run a little pick tool along, make sure you don't have any, or toothbrush, make sure you don't have any solder balls, they call it, in there. You don't want any solder balls collecting in there. Not the most stable rig here, but this is gonna work. So I'm firing up my soldering iron. First thing I'm gonna do is tin these, so I'll probably do that about 700, I do 750. So for this, let's zoom out. There we go. Zoom out for that. Tinning wires is pretty simple, so while I do that, let's get this out of the way. And what I like to do is have it held. Yeah, you can do it either way. You can have it held like that, or twist the wire in your hand too. Either way, you can do it either way. I'm gonna turn my soldering iron up to 750. So I've got 60-40 tin lead solder, 0.8 size. See, rosin core. Seems to be about the right size for me. I like using that. So we're at temp. And another tip, before you ever touch anything, every time on your soldering iron, put solder on the tip. Even if you're going to remove solder, even if you're just touching stuff up, always solder on the tip. Look how nice that is. Now I'm going to touch one side of the wire, heat it up with the solder, and bring in solder. Might have to touch the iron, and look at that, bringing it right in. Look at that gorgeousness. And you can, some like to travel all the way around. That, you know, I put solder in one side and fed it in the other, so I think I'm pretty good there. And that's dirty, so I'm going to clean that off. Back in. That's good. And that's all the way around. Looks pretty good because I really fed in quite a bit there, so it just, your wires really just soak in the solder pretty well. That's already cooled off, should be cooled off by now. So let's do the second one, the negative. So make sure I'm going to brush it off nice and clean. I'm going to tin the tip, get a good amount on, not a ton, I say it's a good amount, so you get a nice little bubble there. See the bubble? And that bubble is what we're going to touch. Right to the side of the wire, heat it up, get it flowing. Look at it flow, look at it flow. Plenty. And you see I didn't feed in more, I used about that much solder altogether. I think the wire was sticking out about that far. So, and every time I put my iron away too, I don't leave that stuff on there. It's gonna burn on there. I clean it off. You get a nice tip when you put it away. Now, we have nice shiny tinned wires. Must clean them. There's flux all over that. I'm not going to try to solder these the way they are. So, I'm going to grab another one of these alcohol pads. Do the same thing, you know, I did before. And look, now it's not sticking, the fibers aren't coming off as much because I got that smooth solders coated on there. All those prongs are kind of covered up. They're coated. Look at that. That's awesome. That's how a tinned wire should look. Oh, that is sure a hell of a lot better than they looked. Came out of the package. I don't know what that was. Okay, so our wire's good. Now, let's get back to the PDB.